Renya Kunugi's long life comes to a sudden, blinding end, but it's not the void waiting for him. A mysterious, golden-haired girl reaches out, her voice echoing with a mix of apology and hope. She's dragging him into a new destiny, wishing him better luck in the next life as the world fades into a brilliant white light. Welcome to a second chance. At 94 years old, Renya is reborn into a vibrant high fantasy world teeming with magic, monsters, and a crew of beautiful companions. The title drops, New Life, plus Young Again in Another World. Chapter 1 begins now, and Renya is about to find out that trouble is already waiting for him at the front gates. Renya opens his eyes to a crystal-clear blue sky and a lush green forest. He's back in a youthful body, but there's a catch. He has absolutely no memories of his previous 94 years. He's relieved the scenery looks normal enough, but he's standing in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the clothes on his back. Suddenly, a holographic screen flickers to life. It's an inventory system. Renya realizes his new body is more convenient than he thought. He digs through his digital stash and finds an item labeled Shinai, level 10 artifact. It's a wooden practice sword, but in this world, an artifact is a legendary item that can't be recreated by human hands. A message from God explains the weird weapon choice. Since Renya was a master of Kendo in his past life, a sword was too overpowered, so he got a Shinai instead. Geared up in basic armor and his artifact stick, Renya decides he needs to find civilization. He tosses a branch to pick a direction, left or right. Fate is about to decide. The branch hits the dirt, but before Renya can even take a step, a piercing scream echoes through the trees. Kya! Renya's internal monologue kicks in. Of all things to run into on day one, it sounds like someone is in serious trouble. He clenches his fist. The hero instincts he doesn't even remember yet starting to take over. He stumbles upon a tense standoff. Two adventurers, Rona Chevalier and Shion Femme Fatale, are backed against a wall by a group of sleazy, laughing thugs. These bandits are closing in, mocking the women and telling them to come play, while Shion desperately tries to keep them at bay with her blade. It's a classic damsel in distress setup, and these guys are the worst of the worst. Renya steps out of the shadows with a casual, "Hey, you guys." He looks the lead bandit in the eye and asks if they feel any shame bullying two ladies. The bandits are stunned. Who is this kid? Renya starts to sweat, wondering if they even speak the same language, but the lead thug's snarling face confirms that the message was received loud and clear. Shion screams at Renya to run, warning him that these aren't just thugs, they're mercenary soldiers from a neighboring kingdom. The lead bandit laughs, mocking Renya for playing hero with a wooden stick. He even offers to let Renya have a go if he's so jealous. The air turns cold as the bandits cackle, completely unaware they just crossed a major line. Renya's expression shifts. A dark, terrifying shadow falls over his eyes as he stares them down. "Say that one more time," he growls, his voice dripping with sudden, lethal intent. He steps forward, unsheathing his level 10 Shinai. The bandits think it's just a stick, but they're about to learn the hard way why you never mock a master swordsman, even if he's only carrying practice gear. The bandit leader scoffs, demanding to know what Renya thinks he's doing. In response, Renya simply levels his wooden blade in total silence. The thug readies his own brutal-looking club, a smug grin plastered on his face. But Renya's eyes are locked on his target, offering a chilling promise. He'll gladly let the bandit grab his weapon, but in exchange, he's going to beat him down thoroughly. The bandit boss bursts into a roaring, arrogant laugh, his hand easily snatching the end of Renya's wooden blade. His crew howls with laughter, mocking Renya for being an absolute idiot. The leader gloats, completely confident he's won the standoff, but his triumphant smirk vanishes in a split second. With blinding speed, Renya closes the gap, launching a devastating high-speed thrust directly toward the leader's chest. Bam! The blunt strike connects right in the center of the bandit's throat. He violently coughs up blood, his eyes bulging as the sheer force of the blow sends him flying backwards, crashing into the dirt. The rest of the gang freezes in pure shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. Renya stands tall, his stance flawless, and casually offers them a piece of advice while Rona stares on in absolute awe. Seeing their boss get totally wrecked, one of the muscle-bound thugs loses his mind. He throws on a pair of spiked brass knuckles and charges furiously, screaming curses at Renya. But Renya doesn't even flinch. With a fluid, almost lazy sidestep, he effortlessly dodges the wild punch and brings the tip of his wooden blade slamming right into the center of the charging thug's forehead. The impact echoes through the forest as the massive thug is launched backward, knocked out cold before he even hits the ground. Renya's expression darkens into a terrifying glare, an intimidating aura radiating from him. He looks down at his fallen enemies and corrects their fatal mistake. This isn't just some stick. It's a true sword. Renya shifts his stance, issuing a final chilling warning to the trembling survivors. Do not enter his attack range. The remaining bandits spit venom, screaming threats, but their bravado is completely gone. One of them suddenly collapses to his knees, violently vomiting from a delayed strike. Renya just flashes a confident, almost demonic smirk. He is totally in his element. And then, the real beatdown begins. Renya goes on a rampage, calling out, "Next!" as he drops bandit after bandit with surgical precision. Whack! A strike to the face. Bam! A blow to the gut. The mercenaries try to rush him, shouting for him not to get cocky, but it's completely useless against his masterful technique. Rona and Shion can only stand there dumbfounded, watching this supposed rookie mop the floor with an entire squad. The dust settles, and the entire mercenary squad is left groaning in the dirt. Renya lets out a relaxed sigh, wiping imaginary dust from his hands. He looks down at the wrecked thugs, shaking his head. He calmly explains that thrusting techniques in Kendo are actually banned for younger practitioners because of exactly this. Even if it looks like a simple wooden stick, in the hands of a master, it can inflict massive injuries. With the threat neutralized, Rona steps forward, bowing her head in gratitude. She sincerely thanks Renya for saving them from a terrible fate. Renya turns around, humbly dismissing the praise, claiming he might have meddled too much. But internally, he's taking a very close look at Rona's generous assets and extremely revealing outfit, secretly admitting to himself that he completely understands why a bunch of thugs were hassling them in the first place. Shion chimes in with her own thanks, admitting that even with her blade, they were completely outmatched. She explains that the mercenary kingdom soldiers are absolute masters of bare-handed combat, which makes Renya's easy victory even more insane. Shion then notices Renya's confusion and points out how bizarre it is that he doesn't even know what the mercenary kingdom is. Caught off guard, Renya quickly covers up his lack of memories by claiming he's a lost person. The girl's eyes widen in realization. They've heard legends of these wanderers, but meeting one who just single-handedly crushed a squad of elite mercenaries? Now that is a first. The girls formally introduce themselves. Shion Femme Fatale, an apprentice swordsman, and the lovely Rona Chevalier, a monk in training. Renya gives his name, keeping it simple. But there's no time for small talk. Shion points out the obvious. These unconscious thugs are going to be a massive headache when they wake up, so it's time to get moving. As they walk, Rona drops some massive world building. They're in Eldora, specifically the miasmatic forest on the eastern continent. Because it borders demon territory, it's an absolute hotspot for vicious monsters. Shion casually drops a terrifying fact. Anyone passed out here for more than 10 minutes is guaranteed monster chow. Renya realizes he essentially just left those bandits to die, but he's strangely calm about it. Rona, however, is stuck on one mind-blowing detail. Renya just arrived in this world? Rona leans in close, her gaze full of admiration, while Shion explains why they're so stunned. Usually, a lost person shows up completely terrified and confused, but Renya just casually dismantled a squad of trained killers. Changing the subject, Renya asks what two apprentices are doing way out here. Rona explains they're on a guild quest to investigate and wipe out a local goblin settlement. Renya can only sweat drop at the sound of that. Renya stealthily pulls up his holographic help menu to check the stats on goblins. They're weak solo, but incredibly dangerous in swarms. He looks at the two girls. Are they really taking on a whole settlement by themselves? Shion looks away, awkwardly admitting their party originally had 8 members. Renya suddenly connects the dots. 1, 2, 3. Wait, were those 6 dirtbags from earlier their party? Shion fumes with rage, confirming that partnering with those creeps was an absolute disaster. Rona advises Renya to catch a carriage to the principality, but Shion stubbornly declares they are staying behind to finish the goblin investigation. Renya is stunned. Isn't that basically a suicide mission now? Rona smiles bravely, explaining that if they don't at least gather some intel, their adventuring careers are over. Plus, if they run away, the nearby villagers will bear the brunt of the goblin attacks. Renya thinks it over for a second before making a shocking call. He's going to help them. Both girls gasp in disbelief. Rona quickly warns him that since he's not registered with the guild, he won't see a single copper coin of the reward money. But Renya just brushes it off with a confident grin. He doesn't want money. His price is information about this new world. Shion is completely flustered. Risking his life for a simple history lesson is an insanely cheap trade. Rona gives Shion a knowing wink, officially declaring that Renya is a genuinely good guy. Even the stoic Shion blushes and has to agree. Renya just smiles, taking it all in. The internal monologue kicks in to wrap up the chapter. This is the story of how Kunugi Renya met 2 beautiful adventurers and officially kicked off his second chance at life. The trio marches forward into the dangerous forest, ready to take on whatever this fantasy world throws at them next. Chapter 2 kicks off right where we left off, with our heroic trio overlooking a peaceful, sprawling landscape. Shion points out a small cluster of houses surrounded by a wooden fence in the distance. It's the humble farming village where she and Rona grew up. Renya looks at the girls, noting that in this new body he looks to be right around their age. Rona smiles, happy that Shion has calmed down since she's usually terrible with men. But internally, Renya is having a massive crisis. He's sweating bullets, awkwardly realizing that mentally, he's a 94-year-old grandpa hanging out with teenagers. He figures he must look like a total weirdo. But wait, how did a 94-year-old master swordsman end up in this youthful body with amnesia anyway? It's flashback time to the opening moments of Chapter 2, before the big fight. We jump back to the exact second Renya crossed over, coming face to face with the mysterious golden-haired entity who dragged him into this mess. Bam! Confetti explodes everywhere as the energetic blonde girl throws her arms wide, happily congratulating Renya on winning the ultimate prize, the right to reincarnate into a different world. Renya is completely baffled as a tiny choir of angels suddenly appears out of thin air, singing blessings on command while the girl eagerly waits for him to jump for joy. The supposed deity keeps the hype train rolling, cheerfully mocking him for living a long life, but dying a total bachelor at age 94. She even dons a fake beard and swirly glasses to joke about how troublesome old people are. She boasts about hooking him up with a fresh 18-year-old body, expecting him to be thrilled. Instead, fool! Renya delivers a flawless, devastating chop right to the top of her divine head. Renya is absolutely furious, veins popping as he scolds her for talking about his private life without permission, demanding to know exactly where he is. Pouting and rubbing her bruised head, the girl finally gets serious. The clouds part. Tiny angel trumpets sound, and she officially introduces herself as the one and only beautiful creator of all things. Welcome to God's domain. God gives him a playful wink. excitedly declaring that from here, he'll start his brand new second life in another world. Renya narrows his eyes and bluntly asks why him. She points right at his chest, explaining that his soul is totally unique. While most spirits hit the dimensional wall and pass on normally, Renya's soul was so strong it bounced right off it, earning him this ultra-rare second chance. She throws her arms out with a dramatic "ta-da!" calling it an absolute miracle. Renya is one in over 5 million souls chosen to be a brand new hero. His old body, spirit, and thoughts were totally cleared out to prep him for the transfer. But Renya just stands there rubbing his temples, completely unimpressed and exhausted by the divine fanfare. The silence is deafening. Renya glares at her and asks the million-dollar question. What does she actually intend to do to him in this new world? God innocently claims she wants nothing, but Renya absolutely loses it. He was perfectly satisfied living to 94, and now he's being forced into a new life like a toy. He grabs her head in a terrifying vice grip, crushing her skull as she desperately screams for mercy, finally cracking and admitting she has an ulterior motive. Tears in her eyes, God finally drops the act and reveals the hard truth. She pulls up a map, explaining that the world he's heading to is called Eldora. But there's a massive, critical catch. She desperately needs Renya to provide resources to this new realm. In Eldora, absolutely everything, the air, the water, and even the souls of men, is considered a resource. And right now, Eldora is facing a catastrophic shortage. God pulls out a map, explaining the brutal reality of Eldora. The world is split into 5 regions, dominated by elves, humans, beasts, demons, and dragon tamers, and they are constantly at each other's throats. But here's the twisted part. Each territory is ruled by an administrator who treats the citizens like literal puppets, orchestrating endless bloody wars. Renya instantly loses his temper. He grabs God by the head again, threatening to crack her skull open for letting these puppet masters run wild. Renya demands to know if these administrators are weaker than her. Whimpering and rubbing her bruised head, God admits she transferred the other 5 into their positions, but complains that even they didn't beat her up like this. Renya asks the obvious question. Why not just strip them of their rights or destroy the ruined world entirely? God frantically waves her hands, sweating buckets as she begs him not to choose the apocalypse. Frustrated, Renya demands to know how this political mess ties into the supposed resource shortage. The truth behind the resource crisis is horrifying. God explains Eldora's reincarnation cycle. When someone dies, whether they're stomped by a dragon, butchered by orcs, or killed in battle, their soul, known as Linus, is supposed to recycle into a new baby. But the wars have made dying so agonizing and traumatic that the incoming souls are literally refusing to reincarnate. A massive pixelated sensor block hides the sheer horror of the battlefield as God sadly admits that the world's spiritual resources are rapidly drying up. Holding a fading ghostly soul in her hands, God reveals she tried to negotiate. She desperately tried to convince the 5 administrators to steer the world in a decent direction and offered the dead souls benefits to keep the cycle going, but she was completely rejected. With no other options, she bows her head and clasps her hands in prayer. She begs Renya for the ultimate favor. Go to Eldora, buy them some time, and save the world from total collapse. Renya gets the gist of the problem, but bluntly refuses to get involved. Desperate, God clings to his shirt, wailing that she already reincarnated him and begging him to think of the weak citizens, the women, and the newborn babies. But Renya isn't buying the crocodile tears for a second and demands the real truth. Dropping the crying act instantly with a cheeky "Tehi," God admits that persuading the other 5 million souls was just too troublesome, so they settled on useless him. Renya is done playing games. After grabbing the annoying deity and forcing an apology, he drops a logic bomb. If she's God, why doesn't she just stop the wars herself? This triggers a terrifying power trip as God imagines descending as an all-powerful overlord, cackling maniacally as she obliterates the world and sends civilians flying with a single finger. Renya immediately shuts the apocalypse dream down, screaming that he doesn't want to rule the world, and besides, conquering everything would just drain even more resources. God realizes her massive oversight. Shifting tactics, God targets Renya's past life as a gastronomist. She tempts him with otherworldly luxury gourmet foods that don't exist on Earth, urging him to travel this new world hunting for rare ingredients. Renya holds his chin, fully admitting that the word gourmet hooked him completely. God pumps her fists in victory, but Renya has one final condition. He wants a cheat ability. Nothing crazy enough to conquer the world, just enough power to survive and keep his new adventure going. God kicks back in her plush chair, acting completely smug, agreeing that a cheat ability is standard procedure for saving the world. After a brief moment of hesitation, she proudly shouts that she can do it because she's God. Renya adjusts his collar, the comedic tension evaporating completely. A serious, heavy shadow falls over his face as he stands ready to negotiate his new life. The ultimate question hangs in the void. Okay, Renya-san, what type of ability do you want? Snap back to the present. Shion repeatedly calls Renya's name, finally snapping him out of his flashback. He blinks, asking what's wrong while Shion glares, annoyed that he wasn't listening to a word she said. They are standing in the pioneer village, and she warns him that spacing out here is incredibly dangerous. They could be facing a whole group of goblins, and fighting strong monsters without a proper weapon is a death wish. But Renya just readies his wooden shinai, firmly declaring that to him, this is a sword. Shion recalls the terrifying aura Renya gave off during the bandit fight, fully acknowledging the lethal danger his stick possesses. But she drops some harsh, practical truth. If he keeps using a blunt weapon, he's going to exhaust his stamina on the battlefield, or worse, the wooden blade will snap mid-fight. Rona happily trusts Renya's weapon choice, but Shion insists that a real sword would make their goblin hunt much easier. Turning away slightly, she hints that there's another reason. She wants him to upgrade his arsenal. Shion tosses her backup sword to Renya. The girls just finished complaining about the smelly, useless loot they got from the mercenaries, completely unfazed by the guys they just beat down, which makes Renya quietly pray for his own safety around them. But jokes aside, Shion is serious. She hands over her spare blade, deciding that if Renya is going to fight alongside them, a wooden stick just isn't going to cut it anymore. Renya unsheathes the blade, giving it a critical eye. He immediately notices the edge feels just like a razor-sharp Japanese katana, perfect for his lethal thrusting techniques. Shion nervously points out the extremely fancy traditional hilt, awkwardly apologizing that while the handle is an expensive heirloom, the blade itself has been broken and replaced countless times. But Renya doesn't care. He gives it a swift, satisfying practice swing, declaring that a sword is a sword, and he gladly accepts. Renya casually drops the blade into his holographic inventory, absolutely blowing the girls' minds. They are incredibly jealous, revealing that his void storage ability is actually super rare in this world. Renya smirks, bragging that his storage capacity is supposedly unlimited, and smoothly offers to carry all their heavy luggage on the way home. The girls are thrilled to ditch their backpacks, but before they can celebrate, Renya gets serious and suggests they go hunt those goblins. But before they can even step outside, Renya whips his head toward the window, his instincts screaming. Shion asks what's wrong, wondering if his lost person abilities are kicking in. Renya stares into the pitch-black forest, admitting he can't see a thing, but he feels an ominous, massive presence moving in the shadows. Rona steps up to the glass, her expression hardening as she realizes it's not a special ability. The enemy is already making their move. "It's time for magic!" Shion calls out to her partner, and Rona instantly jumps into action. Clasping her hands together in a glowing, holy stance, the monk begins to chant. She calls upon the one and all to reveal the enemies hiding in the dark. A massive magical radar pulse erupts from her body, expanding outward in a huge wave, scanning the entire village and the surrounding forest. Rona concentrates on the magical feedback, confirming a massive hostile presence. Her mind's eye lights up with dozens of ominous flames scattered through the trees. She starts counting, 50, maybe even more, and there are still more monsters lurking just outside her range. Renya is stunned by the spell, and Shion quickly explains that this is a divine monk's art called exploration, a powerful radar skill used by those who serve the law to detect hidden dangers. Shion realizes the horrifying reality of those numbers. Goblins usually attack in small groups. A horde of over 50 means this is a full-scale invasion aimed at wiping out the village. Worse yet, a swarm this massive guarantees there's a powerful goblin leader pulling the strings. Sweating under the pressure, Shion immediately snaps into leader mode. She orders Rona to run to the village square, evacuate the women and children, and mobilize every single man capable of fighting. Shion turns to Renya, apologizing for the terrible luck but begging for his help. Renya doesn't hesitate. He grips his new sword and agrees, refusing to abandon them. But the situation is incredibly grim. Shion explains that they are facing a completely armed, highly motivated goblin army led by a powerful commander, and military backup is absolutely out of the question. Rona shouts her evacuation orders to the village, revealing the most depressing stat yet. This entire village only has 10 men capable of fighting, 10 untrained villagers against 50-plus armed goblins. Renya states the obvious. The difference in strength is going to make this insanely difficult. Shion asks the grim question, what happens if they lose? Renya doesn't sugarcoat it. If the front line falls, the villagers become goblin food, and the young women will face a fate worse than death. Shion warns him that he's going to watch them die, but Renya's mind flashes back to God's strict rule. Whatever he does, he can't permanently destroy the souls. With a terrifyingly calm demeanor, Renya just smirks, calling the whole disaster a fun mess. Shion screams at him not to joke around, but Renya is dead serious. He turns his back, casually declaring that fighting for the disadvantaged is exactly what makes a battle worthwhile. Shion stares at Renya in total disbelief, a drop of sweat rolling down her face. As he grips his newly gifted blade, a dark, utterly terrifying grin stretches across his face. He is absolutely thrilled by the overwhelming odds. "Why are you laughing?" she asks, completely horrified. But the time for talk is over. Down in the pitch-black bushes, dozens of glowing, sinister eyes pierce the darkness, accompanied by the creepy, chattering laughs of the approaching goblin horde. The stage is set for an absolute bloodbath. The sun drops below the tree line, plunging the forest into ominous shadows. Renya stands at the village edge, calmly noting that a post-sunset attack is standard monster tactics. Shion steps up beside him, sweating as she feels a sinister aura swelling in the dark woods. But instead of panicking, Renya just smirks, gripping his battle axe as he declares this fight is going to be interesting. Shion takes a grim inventory of their forces. The defense consists of 2 female apprentices, 1 amnesiac, lost person, and 12 terrified villagers holding basic tools. Facing them, a bloodthirsty horde of at least 50 armed goblins, backed by an elite commander. The sheer difference in strength is completely overwhelming, making Shion realize just how desperate this stand truly is as the goblin silhouettes begin to emerge from the brush. Despite the impossible odds stacked against them, Renya carelessly scratches his head and hefts his heavy battle axe. He nonchalantly states he knows they'll win, even if he has absolutely no memory of why he's so confident. Shion is utterly baffled by his total lack of fear, wondering if he's used to surviving life-or-death situations, while Rona nervously smiles, realizing they have no choice but to rely entirely on his crazy bravado. Suddenly, a sharp thwack shatters the silence. An arrow slams into the dirt right at their feet. The goblin invasion begins. A lethal volley of arrows rains down from the pitch-black sky, sending the untrained, panicking villagers screaming for cover. Renya casually deflects a stray arrow with the broadside of his axe, noting the severe trouble they're in. The tree line suddenly erupts as the massive goblin horde charges forward, cackling wildly with their shields, clubs, and blades raised high. Shion instantly shifts into a desperate commander mode, screaming at the villagers with bows to return fire. But the village's counterattack is an absolute unmitigated disaster. The terrified farmers tremble so violently that their arrows either fly wildly off target or land pathetically short in the dirt. The charging goblins literally point and laugh, completely mocking the pathetic human defense. Shion curses under her breath, gritting her teeth in sheer frustration. The villagers are just simple men. They are entirely unprepared for the brutal reality and pressure of actual warfare. Renya steps up, his expression turning terrifyingly dark. He calmly tells Shion that playing a defensive strategy with a panicked, broken militia is a guaranteed loss. The only way to win this is to go completely on the offensive and crush them head-on. Shion is utterly confused, but before she can even process his reckless plan, Renya sprints forward. He completely abandons the defensive line, charging solo right toward the center of the cackling goblin horde as Shion screams his name in absolute panic. Renya clashes head-on with the enemy front line in a spectacular display of brutal violence. In one fluid, flawless motion, he swings his heavy battle axe with bone-crushing force. Slash! The massive blade cleaves completely through the lead goblin's neck, sending its severed head spiraling high into the air. The surrounding goblins freeze in sheer, unadulterated terror as a geyser of blood erupts from their fallen comrade. Renya's eyes are heavily shadowed, a demonic grin plastered across his face. Before the monsters can even process the sudden violent death of their comrade, Renya drops the heavy axe and draws his new sword in a blinding flash. Shing! Another goblin is instantly bisected, blood spraying across the battlefield as Renya carves a brutal bloody path straight through their ranks. Completely surrounded but utterly fearless, he mocks the stunned horde with a chilling yo, declaring that their sick laughter got him fired up, so now it's his turn to enjoy the slaughter. The goblins finally snap out of their shock and roar in absolute fury, swarming Renya from all sides with their weapons raised. Back at the crumbling defensive line, Shion is absolutely losing her mind, screaming at Renya for his completely suicidal solo charge. But Rona interrupts her frantic yelling. The goblins aren't just focused on Renya. A massive secondary wave is flanking them, charging straight for the terrified villagers. Shion curses out loud, realizing she has to desperately hold the line while Renya fights his insane one-man war. Renya transforms into an absolute blur of motion on the chaotic battlefield. He weaves through the massive goblin horde like a seasoned veteran, his blade moving with lethal, surgical precision. He easily ducks under a wild, heavy club swing, counters with a brutal upward slash, and seamlessly transitions into a lightning-fast thrust that skewers another attacker. A goblin tries to cheap shot him with a spear, but Renya effortlessly parries the strike before spinning into a devastating wide-arc slash. He isn't just surviving, he is a one-man army completely dominating the front lines. The massacre continues! Renya completely dismantles a goblin squad with terrifying speed. He seamlessly transitions from his sword back to his heavy battle axe, delivering a brutal overhead swing that cleaves a monster in half. A goblin desperately tries to block the heavy blade with its pathetic wooden shield, but the axe shatters the defense entirely, burying itself deep in the goblin's chest. Renya's eyes widen slightly in surprise. He questions why his incredibly sharp blade didn't instantly pierce the monster's puny heart, realizing these creatures are surprisingly tough. But that doesn't stop him. With a demonic grin, he simply states that he'll just have to pummel them into pieces instead, bringing the blunt end of his weapon down with bone-crushing force. Renya is practically dancing through the battlefield, a whirlwind of absolute destruction. A goblin tries to flank him, but Renya casually sidesteps and delivers a devastating punch directly to its face. "I came all the way here to have fun," he roars, his adrenaline spiking. He points his blade directly at the remaining horde, singling out his next victims with a chilling, "You! And you! You're next to be killed!" The sheer force of his presence and the trail of butchered bodies leave the remaining goblins completely paralyzed in fear. Renya readies his sword again, mocking the terrified monsters to bring it on. While Renya dominates the center, the girls are fighting for their lives on the flanks. Shion lets out a fierce battle cry as she clashes blades with multiple goblins, her swordsmanship skills pushed to the absolute limit. She expertly deflects a spear thrust, narrowly avoiding a lethal blow. Rona is right beside her, using her monk staff to crush the skull of a charging goblin. The girls are holding the line, but they are visibly exhausted and sweating bullets. The sheer numbers of the goblin horde are slowly threatening to overwhelm them. The chaos intensifies as Shion and Rona find themselves surrounded. Shion desperately parries a flurry of incoming strikes, her blade moving in a frantic blur. "You don't have to worry when you're slashing or killing," she thinks to herself, her survival instincts taking over completely. She manages to disarm one goblin, but another immediately takes its place. Suddenly, a goblin manages to slip past her guard, its blade inches from her face, but she barely manages to dodge. In a split second, Shion executes a flawless, lightning-fast thrust, burying her blade deep into the goblin's stomach. She pulls it out just as fast, the monster collapsing in a heap. Rona praises her incredible technique, completely amazed by her partner's skill. But there's absolutely no time to celebrate. More goblins surge forward from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with malicious intent. Rona tightens her grip on her staff, warning Shion that they need to be extra careful. The horde is endless. Shion grunts in frustration, apologizing to Rona for letting the situation get so desperate. She admits that it's still too early to declare victory. Rona smiles bravely, refusing to give up hope. She readies her holy staff, declaring they must give it their absolute best. Shion nods, her resolve hardening as they stand back to back, completely surrounded by a sea of snarling goblins. It's do or die for the two apprentices as they prepare to fight until their last breath. Back to the absolute bloodbath. Renya continues his rampage, but things are getting chaotic. Several goblins realize they can't beat him in close combat and start hurling their rusty blades and shields at him like throwing weapons. Renya easily dodges the projectiles, but it forces him to change his stance. A brave goblin lunges forward, aiming for a lethal strike, but Renya smoothly blocks the attack. Without missing a beat, he thrusts his sword forward, driving the blade straight through the monster's neck with gruesome precision. Renya casually pulls his blade free from the monster's skull, completely unfazed by the gore. He smirks, noting that the sword Shion gave him is holding up incredibly well. But suddenly, the battlefield falls dead silent. A massive, heavy footstep shakes the earth, accompanied by a low, terrifying growl. Renya turns, his smirk fading as he comes face to face with an absolute unit of a monster. Standing nearly twice as tall as the regular goblins, a massive, muscular goblin leader steps out of the shadows, its eyes burning with pure hatred. The goblin leader roars, an intimidating battle cry that echoes through the entire forest. Its terrifying aura paralyzes the surrounding villagers, and even Shion and Rona freeze in fear. The sheer size and muscle mass of this monster prove that it's completely out of their league. Shion screams at Renya to run. She warns him that it's absolutely impossible to fight the commander with his chipped and damaged sword. She desperately volunteers to hold it off while he escapes. But Renya doesn't move an inch. He slowly turns his head, a sinister, battle-crazed smile spreading across his face. "Don't be stupid," he scoffs, completely dismissing Shion's warning. He casually flicks his sword, sending a stream of goblin blood splattering across the dirt. He points his chipped, damaged blade directly at the towering monster. With an aura even more terrifying than the goblin leaders, Renya asks the ultimate question. If she can't even handle the weaklings, how is she going to kill this massive beast? The final showdown is about to begin. The clash of titans begins. Renya's chipped blade meets the Goblin Leader's massive sword with a bone-rattling zun. The monster puts all its weight into a downward strike, but Renya easily holds his ground, instantly analyzing the attack. It's so slow, he realizes. But as the beast pulls back for a sweeping horizontal slash, Renya's eyes widen. He notices the sheer absurd length and width of the monster's extended blade. Renya leaps backward, narrowly dodging the massive sword as it carves through the air. His tactical mind races, breaking down the monster's fighting style on the fly. The attack is incredibly heavy and slow, carrying a massive amount of destructive force purely because of the ridiculous size of the weapon. But Renya acknowledges the extreme danger. Despite the sluggish speed, that sword gives the commander a lethally long reach. But Renya spots the fatal flaw. With a weapon that massive, the Goblin Leader has a glaring weakness defending against quick, close-range horizontal strikes. "Too slow!" Renya shouts, his eyes locked on the opening. He dashes forward with blinding speed, diving completely under the monster's wide guard. "I have to attack quickly! Game over!" he declares, preparing to deliver the final lethal slash. But it's a trap. Just as Renya goes for the killing blow, a regular goblin leaps out from completely behind the commander's massive back, its dagger raised high. Renya is totally caught off guard, completely shocked that another enemy was using the giant as a meat shield. Forced to desperately abort his attack to defend himself, Renya quickly slices through the sneak attacker's wrist in a shower of blood, disarming the smaller goblin but losing his perfect opening. The battle rages on. Renya stabs a goblin, but the giant Goblin Leader seizes the opening. With a furious roar, the beast delivers a massive kick that sends Renya sliding backwards. But throwing all his massive weight into that wild strike completely backfires, causing the giant commander to lose his balance and topple over. The tables turn instantly. As the monster crashes to the ground from his own clumsy kick, Renya violently stomps his boot straight down to pin the giant to the dirt. Renya stands tall over his fallen enemy, holding up his snapped blade. He flashes a terrifying smirk and taunts the beast, pointing out that its lack of lower body armor meant even his crappy broken sword could easily cut through. The trap is sprung. A massive geyser of blood erupts from the Goblin Leader's throat. The giant beast twitches its last breath on the ground. Renya, drenched in shadow and blood, casually picks up the leader's massive, heavy blade. With a truly demonic glare, he declares the weapon is trash, but it'll do to finish the fight, completely unsatisfied with the slaughter so far. The battlefield freezes in pure horror. The villagers, along with Shion and Rona, watch in absolute shock, terrified by the gruesome sounds of death and the panicked, bloodied faces of the monsters. Renya doesn't hesitate. He hefts the massive sword and swings it in a wide, terrifying arc, demanding the remaining goblins share their terror and pain with him. Renya goes full berserker. He stands amidst the butchered horde, a horrifying, unhinged smile plastered across his heavily shadowed face. Gripping a trembling goblin by the skull, he rests the massive blade on his shoulder and crazily roars that he looks forward to more and more. The remaining monsters are completely paralyzed by his overwhelming, bloodthirsty aura. The chaotic night finally breaks into a quiet, dawning sky. The battlefield falls dead silent. Utterly drained, Shion and Rona collapse in the tall grass. Rona looks over at her partner, asking if she's still alive. Shion manages a weak, exhausted laugh, softly admitting that she survived somehow. Shion and Rona stare out across the field, deeply relieved to be alive. Their eyes lock onto Renya's silhouette standing victorious in the rising sun. They realize that against all odds they've been saved. Thanks to him, the village is secure, and Chapter 3 comes to an epic close. The slaughter continues as Renya violently slices through a goblin, making it scream in agony. He scolds the monsters mid-fight, yelling that their attacks are all wrong. He fluidly spins and slashes another beast to his right, correcting their combat form as he cuts them down. As another goblin tries to sneak up, Renya effortlessly anticipates the cheap shot, calling them stupid for attempting such an obvious attack from behind. Watching this absolute massacre from above, the blonde goddess angrily pulls her hair, complaining about how incredibly frustrating he is. Sitting in her divine gaming chair, the goddess watches the bloodbath and seriously questions her own choices. Seeing Renya completely unhinged and covered in monster blood, she wonders if erasing his past memories was a massive mistake. Realizing that with his current insane abilities, wiping out 100 goblins is an absolute piece of cake. We then flash back to the white void of God's domain. The goddess stares intensely down at Renya and asks the ultimate question: what kind of cheat ability does he actually want? Welcome to the official start of Chapter 4, the cleanup after the battle. The dramatic title drop declares that the day will rise again beyond the wretched night. The cover page features an absolutely badass shot of Renya standing victorious over the butchered goblin horde, gripping a blood-soaked blade as he stares out into the beautiful sunrise. Back in the flashback, Renya proudly shouts his first request. Since he has a brand new body, he wants perfect health. The goddess deadpans, sweating as she types on her laptop, completely baffled that he's prioritizing basic health over a cool superpower. She asks if he wants anything else, and Renya instantly starts dreaming of massive, endless feasts. Since his true hobby is eating, he demands a strong stomach, healthy kidneys, a massive appetite, and a high alcohol tolerance. The goddess calls him super greedy, but Renya furiously yells back to shut up because looking cool won't fill his belly. Renya thoughtfully strokes his chin, logically pointing out that he needs an ability to cater for himself so he can pay for all that amazing food. The goddess reminds him that this is a dangerous world filled with swords and magic, meaning he's going to need proper battle equipment to survive all the fighting. She notes he looks exactly like a master swordsman, which totally surprises our amnesiac hero since he doesn't remember a single thing. The goddess assures him that his body's muscle memory will kick in the second he fights. Since standard weapons won't cut it and there aren't any highly refined Japanese katanas in this new world, she decides to hook him up with a specialized smithing and appraisal skill instead. Next on the wish list is magic. A glowing, highly complex magic circle suddenly appears right out of thin air, and Renya immediately confirms that's exactly the kind of power he wants to use. Looking over a digital menu of elemental abilities, Renya ponders whether raw strength or agility is more important, ultimately deciding that speed is the true key to victory. He confidently brushes off any strength buffs, declaring he'll just train his brand new youthful body to build up his own muscle later. The goddess just types away with a sneaky laugh, quietly noting his incredibly practical requests. The goddess confidently smirks, declaring that with her ultimate divine powers, granting these skills will be an absolute piece of cake. She generously tosses in the ability to speak the new world's language alongside a supportive ability. Without a moment to lose, she officially initiates the transfer. A brilliant aura envelops Renya as a system prompt confirms he has acquired the blessings of God. He stares at his glowing hands, feeling the rush of his brand new powers finally surging through his body. But the goddess drops a dark, crucial warning. Flashing forward to Renya's terrifying, blood-soaked face during the Goblin massacre, she reveals that these new abilities will heavily affect his body and make him much more brutal in combat. Furthermore, she absolutely refuses to teach him how to actually cast the magic he just requested, telling him he just has to be patient and figure it out. Sitting back in her chair with a confident smile, she fully believes that our overpowered amnesiac will do just fine on his new adventure. The flashback ends, bringing us directly back to the grim reality of the Goblin aftermath. The sun is finally up, and the villagers are picking through the carnage. Shion delivers the heavy, heartbreaking news. Out of the entire local militia, only 2 men survive defending their homes. Looking completely defeated, she tells Rona that they unfortunately have no choice but to permanently abandon the settlement. But as she watches Renya casually tossing a goblin corpse onto a massive pile in the distance, she firmly admits that having any survivors at all is a sheer miracle. A miracle only made possible by his terrifying skills. Shirtless and dripping with sweat, Renya puts his new strength to work, casually hurling a heavy goblin body onto a massive disposal pile. He mentally notes how incredibly tough his new body and soul are, though he admits he's really not interested in doing gross post-war cleanup. Wiping the sweat from his tired face, he wonders if all lost people in this world are fully human. Watching his impressive physique from afar, Shion points out they were only saved because he was on their side. But Rona just stares at him with a deep, concerned look, quietly realizing that there is something truly terrifying about their new savior. The massive cleanup begins. Rona asks if the current setup is good enough as they stand before a massive, gruesome pile of goblin corpses stacked on top of wooden logs. Renya agrees it's okay, suggesting they burn a few at a time to manage the massive numbers. Rona explains the grim reality. If the monsters aren't burned, they will turn into the undead and attack innocent people all over again. Renya sweats, utterly confused about what the hell these creatures actually are. Shion steps forward to handle the cremation, and Rona gives her an approving nod. Gathering magical energy in her hands, Shion begins to chant, calling upon her authority to make the red dwarf dance. Whoosh! Shion unleashes her magic, instantly igniting the corpse pile in a massive burst of roaring flames. Rona is totally impressed, turning to Renya to ask if he can ignite fires like that too. Renya just stares at the blaze with a surprised, "Oh!" Rona smiles, humbly admitting she's only an apprentice right now, but once she officially becomes a priest, she'll be able to cast spells too. She explains that her unique spells borrow the direct power of God, but the heavy price is that she can't use standard magic. Meanwhile, Shion chuckles to herself, proudly wondering if her magical flames have gotten even stronger. Renya is caught off guard, telling Shion it was totally unexpected since he thought she only specialized in physical combat. Rona chimes in, agreeing that's usually true, and noting that Shion's fire spell is just basic-level magic that anyone can learn. Shion feels completely insulted, yelling, "Hey!" Gritting her teeth, Shion admits her magic isn't great, but furiously screams at Rona not to call her a muscle brain. Watching them bicker, Renya rubs his chin, suddenly remembering that he specifically asked the goddess to let him use magic too. He wonders if even an amnesiac lost person can cast spells. Shion proudly interrupts, offering to introduce him to her magic teacher once they return to the city, smugly noting that it's something Rona can't do. A hand raises a heavy sack of loot. Renya asks Rona what they are supposed to do with the mana cores harvested from the dead goblins. Rona explains they have to submit the magic cores directly to the guild as concrete proof that they successfully completed their request. Holding up a glowing crystal, she reveals that mana cores possess various powers and uses, but for right now, out in the field, they are completely useless. Renya nods in understanding. Suddenly, Shion notices something in the distance with an O. Staring down a long dirt road across the plains, she announces that regular transportation from Kukurica has finally returned. The trio hitches a ride on a horse-drawn carriage, making their way out of the dense forest. Even though their unexpected goblin war delayed them by a few days, they finally reach civilization. Standing before a massive, imposing stone gate with an open portcullis, Rona happily declares that they are finally home, welcoming Renya to the trading city of Kukurica. They walk through the bustling city streets, passing busy market stalls and armed guards. Rona acts as the tour guide, explaining that the population is fairly small at only 10,000 residents. Since the city borders the dangerous forest, it is heavily defended by 2,000 elite soldiers under the direct control of the Principality of Trident. Renya looks around the marketplace, noting that while there are no special products, business is absolutely thriving with various goods being sold. Approaching the inner walls, Renya is impressed by how refined the city looks, but his tactical mind immediately points out that the defensive walls don't look very sturdy. Suddenly, danger! 2 city guards aggressively cross their spears right in front of Renya's face, blocking his path. Renya looks completely startled as the guard demands to see his ID, stating he hasn't seen Renya around before. Shion immediately jumps into action, apologizing and explaining that Renya is a lost person. Rona smoothly pulls out her official guild card, stepping up to guarantee his credentials and explaining they got caught in a pinch during their mission. Renya awkwardly apologizes for the trouble, and the guards quickly withdraw their weapons, granting the group permission to enter. Renya looks at Shion, totally impressed, realizing that her adventurer status makes her a total elite. Shion laughs smugly, bragging that being an adventurer is a truly wonderful thing. But Rona gets serious, turning to Renya and suggesting that considering his future, he needs to register as an adventurer at the guild immediately. Renya is completely shocked, defensively asking why he should do that. Rona explains that the registration process is extremely quick, and an official guild card serves as a powerful identity card, showing off her own ID as proof. Rona leads the way, stating they will head straight to the guild to report their mission. Renya silently watches her from behind, internally sweating as he realizes Rona is incredibly good at smoothly guiding his actions. They arrive at the Adventurers Guild, marked by a classic crossed sword sign. Rona steps up to the front desk, confirming they are there to report on the forest investigation request. But the receptionist looks down at her documents in total confusion, asking a grim question. The records show there were supposed to be 8 party members. Shion and Rona exchange nervous glances as Rona hesitantly asks if she needs to report on that specific problem. Realizing the complicated situation, the receptionist gestures to a private back room to discuss the missing party members. She asks Rona and Shion to help complete Renya's registration in the meantime, acknowledging that he's a lost person who helped them. The receptionist slides an official Adventurers Guild registration form across the desk as the girls wish Renya good luck. Renya stares at the paper, nervously asking if he can complete the form in Japanese. The receptionist is completely baffled by the word Japanese, telling him to just follow the instructions. But Renya is secretly amazed. He looks down at the application and realizes the foreign text perfectly translates into Japanese characters in his mind, internally praising the goddess for giving him such an incredibly useful cheat skill. Renya asks about the application text. The receptionist explains the guild's 4 core rules. 1. Killing other members is completely forbidden unless there's a damn good reason. 2. Members must make tangible or intangible contributions to the guild. 3. Ask the clerk if you don't know something. 4. Division heads can enforce their own local rules. Renya is surprised that's all there is to it. The receptionist smiles, explaining there are minor rules, but making things overly complicated for combat-focused adventurers is pointless. The receptionist cheerfully accepts Renya's application, officially making him an adventurer. She hands him his brand new guild card, and Renya stares at it, completely underwhelmed by how simple it is. Rona and Shion finally emerge from the back room. Shion looks totally exhausted but confirms they got a reasonable reward, though explaining their crazy situation took a while. Jackpot! The girls dump a massive pile of shiny gold coins onto a tavern table. Shion proudly announces their reward is a whopping 12 gold coins. An informational text box drops some lore. 1 gold equals 100 silver, which equals 10,000 copper coins, and a loaf of bread costs 10 copper. Renya is stunned by the massive payout. Rona explains it was originally an 8-person quest, plus they encountered an unexpectedly massive goblin horde. But then, Shion drops a bombshell. She and Rona decided to give Renya a full half of the entire reward. Renya's jaw drops. Renya immediately refuses, sweating as he insists that half the reward is way too much. Shion firmly disagrees, pointing out that despite the original plan, he's the one who basically completed the entire request. Rona chimes in, stating that considering his solo rampage, 2 people, let alone their original 8, would never have been enough to take on that massive horde. She sincerely tells him they honestly wanted to give him even more. But Shion reveals the real reason for the massive payout. They have another huge favor to ask him. Shion stares Renya dead in the eyes with absolute seriousness. "Renya, I want you to join our party," she declares. Renya is completely caught off guard by the sudden recruitment pitch. Rona quietly sips her tea, watching his reaction closely as the tension at the table suddenly spikes. Shion nervously looks away, blushing slightly as she admits she's pretty short-sighted and usually relies on Rona, so she'd really appreciate his assistance. Rona adds that continuing their adventures with just 2 girls is incredibly inconvenient. Renya rubs his head, skeptically asking how they can trust him so easily. But Shion totally shuts that down, reminding him that if he was untrustworthy, he would have just run away and left them to die during the goblin fight. Rona pushes the logic, explaining that as an adventurer, it's just much more efficient to hunt together rather than totally alone. Renya agrees that finding allies isn't a bad idea, especially since he promised the goddess he'd experience this new world. But he's still hesitant. Staring down at his cup, he asks the girls to give him 1 night to sleep on the massive decision. Later that night, Renya sits shirtless on his inn bed, wiping himself down with a wet towel. He sighs in frustration, his inner Japanese nature missing a proper hot bathtub. As he cleans up, his mind races, wondering what his next move should be. He thinks back to the girls' offer, considering if he should accept them as true allies. In their own room, Shion confidently tells Rona she knows Renya isn't a bad person since she's fought beside him. Rona agrees, but admits she's still incredibly curious about his true nature, suspecting they might be hiding something. Suddenly, a knock at Renya's door interrupts his thoughts. He grabs his sword handle, defensively asking who it is. Rona's soft voice apologizes for the late hour, asking for a quick word. Renya tells her the door is unlocked. The door clicks open, and Renya's eyes bulge out of his skull. Rona steps into the room, blushing furiously and sweating, wearing an incredibly revealing sheer nightgown. Renya totally panics, mentally screaming about her outfit. Without a single word, Rona crawls onto the bed right next to him, softly whispering, "Of course," as she leans in incredibly close. The tension hits an absolute boiling point. Rona completely closes the distance, leaning intimately over a totally frozen and sweating Renya. With a heavy blush and a sultry stare, she looks deep into his eyes and softly asks if he knows exactly what she wants. She whispers his name, leaving our overpowered, monster-slaying hero completely defenseless in the ultimate cliffhanger. And that is where we are wrapping up Chapter 4. If you enjoyed this high-energy recap, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know down in the comments if you want a part 2, or drop a comment telling me what manga I should recap next.